The title of this PowerPoint is Comprehension. The purpose for reading is to comprehend what the author is trying to say. There are three essential components to comprehension: the reader, the text, and the task activity or the context. Let's look at the needs of the reader first. The reader needs three characteristics to effectively comprehend whatever they are reading. They need to have some background knowledge in the topic. If you've never had an experience with the topic, it's more difficult to understand. This can be for narrative or informational texts. Asking some questions before reading can give you a sense of what the reader knows or doesn't know. For example, a narrative text may be about camping in the woods. If a student has never been camping, they may not know what the different equipment is used for or how to cook when camping, etc. Or maybe they've only camped in a motorhome where they have air conditioning, a refrigerator, bathroom, etc. They will not quite understand a character's challenge of tent camping in the rain. If you find the reader doesn't have any background knowledge for the topic being read, do some introduction or pre-teaching of the topic and vocabulary that they'll encounter in the passage. Don't assume that all students have had experiences that seem familiar to you. The second need of the reader is motivation. If the student doesn't want to read or to read about a specific topic, we need to do what we can to encourage them to read. Some students do not like to read narratives, but they love to read informational text. Although they need to practice reading both, give choice when possible. Giving book talks about books you like can motivate some students. They often want to do what their friends do or what you do. Motivation can also be affected by lack of background knowledge, as explained earlier. The third important aspect for the reader is their learning abilities. You need to know your student's abilities and then teaching using approaches that work with that student. If the student is on an IEP, work with their teacher. You may need to assess their decoding skills and sight word knowledge and strengthen those areas. The second component of comprehension is paying attention to the type of text the students are reading. More students are more familiar with the structure of narrative text and the types of language used than they are with informational or expository text. There are separate PowerPoints for tips for comprehending each of these types of texts in other modules. The third component of comprehension is the task activity. What are the reasons or expectations of what the reader will get from the reading? What's the purpose for reading? Are they reading for enjoyment during a 20-minute silent reading time? Or are they reading to do a book report after finishing the book? Are they reading their science text to be able to do a science experiment? These are important considerations when you set up the reading. When we look at Vygotsky's findings, we find that scaffolding for students is important. Knowing their understanding of the three components explained above is needed. If the passage wasn't explicit enough to understand the content, what can you do to help them understand it? So what could the teacher do to help the student comprehend? Let's look at our earlier slide. This slide showed the three components with the skills needed for each. The National Reading Panel looked at many comprehension research studies and found specific ways to address comprehension. The National Reading Panel specifically addressed the importance of teaching comprehension skills that are needed for both narrative and expository text. The 7 strategies they recommend teaching students to use include activating and using their background knowledge, also called their schema, generating and asking good questions, making inferences, predicting, summarizing, visualizing, and comprehension monitoring. These strategies are explained on the following slides. Using background knowledge and experiences. Teach students to make connections to their previous life experiences. Even in some kindergarten classes, they teach students the term to say, use your schema, what you already know. Students will know some things, but not all. Build on what they do know. Think about your students and their varied life and educational experiences. You may have students who have recently immigrated, students from homes with highly different economic situations, which affects their experiences. Teach them to use their current knowledge to understand the text and to use the text to add new information to their schema for future learning. There are some specific connections students can make with help. One type of connection is text to self. These are very personal connections, things they have experienced in their real lives, not just hearing or reading about them. The second type of connection is text to text. For example, I read something like this in a different book. The third type of connection is text to the world. For example, I saw a TV show about this. Create a hand symbol for each type as a cue. When students are reading or you are reading in a group and they make a connection, they can make the sign. Then you can see who is connecting and can call on those students to share their connection to the passage. Their stories can help other students understand as well. How do connections improve comprehension? While making connections can improve their comprehension of a passage, it can also distract the reader. For example, a student makes the text-to-self sign and they say, "I went to the beach last summer. It was so much fun." And then they're so excited thinking about their past experience, it takes them a while to get back to the story that they're actually reading. Challenge students to think about how their connections contribute to their understanding of the text. Teacher modeling a think aloud for young children is important. For example, when you're reading the book Owen, you might say, "I felt like Owen when I wanted to take my stuffed cat to school when I was little." This is a story where Owen wanted to take his blanket to school, but his parents had said no. Making connections should lead to comprehension. Here are some examples of teacher modeling for each type of connection. Text to self, you might say, "This reminds me of my vacation." Text to text, "This problem is similar to the one Frog and Toad had in the story that we read last week." Text to the world, "We watched a movie about volcanoes last week. It was very cool." The second strategy recommended by the NRP is asking questions, teaching students to ask themselves questions while they are reading, not just teachers asking questions when they are finished reading. Questions we may use while reading: what does this mean? Is this important? How do I think this story will end? What will this selection be about? What does this word mean? What did I learn? Do I need to read this again? Strategy number 3 is making inferences. Authors use words to imply ideas, and then readers infer. Good readers are detectives who are always looking out for clues to help them better understand stories and pictures. When students are taught to use this strategy, they improve their ability to construct meaning. Choose text where the author implies without stating facts to teach this strategy. Predicting is the next strategy. This is an easy one to introduce to very beginning readers. Predicting is more than just guessing. It's guessing or predicting using information provided by the author and illustrator. We call it informed predictions. Students are connecting their existing knowledge to new information. They may connect what they know about an author to a new text by the same author. The title may remind them of texts of similar topics, allowing them to predict the content of the new content. Summarizing is the next strategy and can be challenging when the strategy is a new one. Students often want to retell every detail they can remember from the story or informational passage. That's a good comprehension strategy, but summarizing is then pulling out the most important points. Summarizing is usually taught after they can retell a text. Summarizing helps readers pull together what the text was about. It gives them practice in explaining what they read in their own words. It can help students recall text quickly, and it makes them aware of the text organization and what is important. Visualizing is the next comprehension strategy. It can be described as making a mental image or making a movie in their head. It can help them be better at recalling what they read. In a book with pictures or illustrations, they often think back to those as retell or summarize it. When there aren't pictures or illustrations, we're teaching them to do that by the author's words and their own connections. This is especially beneficial for narrative text. They may be better able to understand what's happening by picturing the setting and what's happening to the characters. For expository text, they are visualizing steps in a process, etc. The final strategy is comprehension monitoring. This is teaching the student to really pay attention to whether they are understanding what they're reading while they are reading. We've all experienced reading a page in a book and then realize we have no idea what we just read because we were distracted. Good readers realize when they don't understand that they should use a fix-it strategy. Fix-it strategies include rereading the sentence, the paragraph, or as much as is necessary to comprehend, or reading ahead. Keep reading to see if an explanation of the concept will be next in the reading. They may not understand because they don't know some of the words. This is often the case with Tier 2 and especially Tier 3 words. They may need to use a dictionary or a glossary to find out the meaning. Then if they can't figure it out with these strategies, they can ask someone. Over time, good readers are flexible in their strategy use. They use different strategies for different types of texts. They don't all use the same strategies. They can benefit from explicit strategy instruction, and the deliberate use of strategies improves their comprehension. Teachers at every level and every content area need to teach and model using strategies to understand their reading. Don't assume that all students know or use all of the strategies.